Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
Over many missions and against impossible odds, Dom Toretto and his family have outsmarted and outdriven every foe in their path. Now they must confront the most lethal opponent they've ever faced. Fueled by revenge, a terrifying threat emerges from the shadows of the past to shatter Dom's world and destroy everything and everyone he loves. This is Fast X. I am Seth.
I am Ariana.
And today we will be reviewing the 10th film in the Fast franchise, as well as talking about what we thought of the series finale seasons of Succession and Barry. First up, Fast X. So, Ariana, you have watched a mere drop of these films. I think you watched Fast 9. Had you seen anything before that? Like before we were a couple?
I watched Tokyo Drift like a long time ago, probably when I was living in Puerto Rico. And I probably saw this first movie like a long time ago on cable. I know that like Fast and Furious was a big thing in Puerto Rico because there is a large like car culture, and they did film like a few like stuff in Puerto Rico.
Oh, they did.
I don't know if they like said it was cute.
I think Fast 5, they might have done some things in Puerto Rico.
Yeah,
possibly.
and it's just
So I have seen all 10 movies. I've also watched the online prelude short films that they did for a couple of them back when they were bringing like Dom back into the series. I have ridden the ride at Universal Studios, Florida. I have not ridden I know there's like a backlot tour in the California Universal Studio that includes elements of the Fast and Furious ride, but the Orlando location is the complete ride experience. So I have had that. Which is
boys and party girls.
Yeah, it is important. And I've also seen Better Luck Tomorrow, Justin Lin's side movie before he started directing Fast and Furious that introduced Han to us, played by Sung Kang. So you might say I'm a bit of a Fast and Furious expert. I hate this franchise. It's entertaining in all of the worst ways. What did you think? Overall, this is the first of a trilogy within the Fast franchise. We need to remind people. So there is a cliffhanger, question mark. It didn't really feel like a cliffhanger. It just felt like they ran out of movie.
Yeah.
It was just like, and now the movie stops, and then we'll make another one.
It is infuriatingly long, and I feel like
what, 2 hours and 20 minutes for them to have no conclusion? You think that's too long?
And I love that whenever we're back with like the ludicrous people.
Sorry. Roman, Tej, and Ramsey. Get their names correct, okay?
The technology crew. Anytime we're like back with them, they need to exposition the hell of what it is that they're doing, because they're kind of like, hey, we know that you guys probably have disassociated or we're thinking about something else. Maybe making a list in your head of what you have to do tomorrow.
Well, one could say that the Roman, Tej, and Ramsey serve as a sort of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of the Fast franchise. These characters in the background commenting on things that are happening.
Yeah. And like it's like every time Dom is on screen, it's sort of like family, love, car. And
Did you write the script?
All I kept thinking about was the last film of this franchise, which I watched because they aged up Dom's son, Little Brian. R.I.P. Paul Walker. Little B is aged up and is a clearly like mixed black kid.
Neither of his parents, like, because Vin Diesel
he's mixed.
Okay,
he is,
but
mixed.
I feel like, is he Cuban?
I think it's just more like it's his background is sort of like all over the place.
Yeah,
it's just he's a guy that like if you told me he's Italian American or Latino, I'd be like, okay, sure. But then his the mom, the biological mom,
is a Brazilian, a white Brazilian
white
woman.
Brazilian woman. Like, and then like Rita Moreno is in there as the abuelita of the group. She's Puerto Rican, so it's just it kept thinking about Cypher going like,
Is Michelle Rodriguez of Mexican descent?
She's Puerto Rican. I think she's Puerto Rican and Dominican.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I haven't updated my data.
And then I know Jordana Brewster, who plays Mia, is Brazilian. Yeah.
So, but it's just like my love was just like Charlize Theron when she's explaining about like Jacob, like aka.
Oh yes, I forgot because then we have John Cena's character, Jacob Toretto.
Like, and it's supposed to be, she's like, yes, you know, Toretto bloodline is so mixed.
Well, and his name is spelled like the Jewish spelling of Jacob.
Yes.
Which they've never commented on that, and I'm like, so is his mom Jewish or what? Because I feel like, okay, if you're really worried about spoilers for this movie, we're gonna be spoiling it. So the scene where John Cena dies at the end of this movie, they could have kind of revealed to us the Jewish thing by him being like, shalom, and then just bursting into flames or something. So, like,
is he actually dead in the, or they're gonna bring him back?
That was part of the cliffhanger, so we have no idea. Okay, maybe he somehow survived the car explosion. No one dies in these movies. What are you talking about?
Learned about this franchise has been against my will. Like, one of the things, like, scrolling through TikTok or looking through like online, someone had said, oh, you know, Brie Larson that plays Tess based her character off of like Vin Diesel's daughter. What? Because she's a daughter? Because she's a woman?
Has she met Vin Diesel's daughter? But I feel like we need to talk about the cast in this movie, right? The cast and the number of characters you're expected to keep up with in this movie. Of course, Dom Toretto. You're not going to have a fast movie without Dom unless it's Tokyo Drift or Fast and Furious 2.
Tokyo Drift,
like, the post-credits scene.
Post-credits.
Fast and Furious 2 is the only one he doesn't appear in, and that's where we're introduced to Roman and Tej.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have Vin Diesel as Dom, Jason Momoa as the villain, Dante Reyes. We have Alan Richardson as Ames, who takes over for Mr. Nobody at the agency. Mentioned before, Rita Moreno as Abuelita Toretto. We have Michelle Rodriguez as Letty. How could you not? Introducing Brie Larson as Tess, the daughter of Mr. Nobody. We have Han, again, of course, Roman. Charlize Theron reprises her role of Cypher.
Yeah.
Now a friend. Speaking of former foes turned friends, we also have Deckard Shaw, played by Jason Statham. And don't think we're going to leave out Mama Shaw, Queenie, played by Helen Mirren. She's in there. Did Jordana Brewster appear in this film?
Yes, she did.
She
babysits little B.
Yeah,
and then, like,
which is weird because she has her own kids, but Brian is always at home babysitting her kids because they can't kill off Paul Walker's character.
Yeah, of course, like he can't be with his cousins.
Yeah. Daniela Melchior, who played Ratcatcher in The Suicide Squad, shows up as Isabel Neves, who's the sister to Dom's baby mama.
Like kid sister too, because she's like in her 20s.
Yeah,
the baby mama was like in her 30s, going to 40s.
Scott Eastwood, son of Clint, plays Little Nobody. He's appeared before. He's Bree's brother in this movie. As we said, Jacob Toretto, John Cena. We have Natalie Emmanuel as Ramsey. I don't believe Michael Rooker's buddy appeared in this movie yet. He will, I'm sure he'll appear next. We have Ludacris, Tej. Paul Walker's daughter appears as a stewardess who helps out Jacob at some point. She seems to know what's going on. I don't know what that's about. Maybe she'll show up again. We, of course, have Little B. Pete Davidson shows up as an arms dealer in London who doesn't have a British accent. He's just Pete Davidson. It's such a... we use footage of... I think they did film new stuff with Joaquin de Almeida as Hernan Reyes, which is Jason Momoa's father, who was the villain in Fast Five. So I think there was new footage shot there. And then there's little characters here and there. But yeah, that's kind of the cast of the movie. Spoiler, I do want to spoil the post-credit scene, you sumbitch, because
oh god,
I did read something about this. So we have a post-credit scene where for some reason, Dante, Jason Momoa, the villain, is antagonizing other people outside of the story, including one Hobbs, played by Dwayne Johnson, who shows up at the end. I heard that was filmed after the James Gunn confirmation of what was and wasn't staying in Warner's DC cinematic universe. And then I guess and then The Young Rock got canceled this week on NBC. So this rock is crumbling. And so I guess he came pleading back to the Fast franchise to please give me a space in there. If you're not familiar, reportedly he and Vin Diesel would clash on the set of the movie when they did the spinoff. I forgot. I've also seen the Hobbs and Shaw movie, the spinoff.
And he also like
he got in fights with Jason Statham on the set of that. So I just think Dwayne Johnson's probably just an egomaniacal asshole.
I think confrontation with the two other bald dudes in the franchise besides I feel like these dudes are
like Vin Diesel's just kind of a laid back weirdo. That's the vibe I get from him.
Basically a nerd who just got lucky.
As I said in a review many years ago, he's an uncooked ball of dough.
The thing is, he's a huge D&D fan, so I'm wondering how he felt about Michelle Rodriguez,
being in Dungeons and Dragons. Oh yeah, I bet he loved that.
He then he's the voice of
Groot,
and it's just sort of this guy that tried to make himself into a big thing and then came crawling back to the franchise and kind of understands this is just who he is. Because when you see if you even Google YouTube, there are people who post about how Vin Diesel will repost online images that people have made edited of him with inspirational quotes. I think he's just a nerd who got lucky.
I think he has no self-awareness. I think that's one of the things with
because he's just a nerd, and Jason Statham, you think established action stars that kind of are just they know what they're doing, they're comfortable with themselves, and The Rock has to come in being the biggest macho.
I think The Rock is very insecure.
Yes, he has he has a thing in his contract where he cannot lose.
So that's why, famously in Fast 5, his big battle with Vin Diesel, neither of them wins or loses. They fight to a standstill. They're literally throwing each other through concrete walls and shit.
Yeah, and I think it would have been a more interesting film had they, because there was a remark about the neighborhood where Dom lives, which is the same house that it was in the first film. Had that neighborhood's been gentrified the fuck out of, right? And it would have been more interesting if somebody said, "Oh, well, the reason that he does all these missions is to be able to afford the house that he lives in."
And the car, next to his car, I would feel like.
I have there is so
Echo
much...
Park is where they live, which is it's from what I've read. I've never been there, but I have read that it's been very gentrified.
Yes, and it's the Fast and the Furious franchise is so interesting to me because it's there's never really a talk of how it is that they get these cars to the places that they go to, especially because
they can go around the world in minutes.
Yeah, they are there's this whole mission in Rome that turns out the agency was not a part of, that Roman is taking over, and it's supposed to be this whole big deal, and then Dom shows up in his own car.
One of the greatest lines. There's a lot of great lines in this movie. We're going to go through many of them. Tej says to Roman, "Rome, the only Rome you know is Rome man noodles." I don't understand what that was supposed to mean. I don't know what
it's saying that he's poor.
But his name is Roman and they're going to Rome. You feel like they'd make a joke about that, but the name is ramen noodles, which it's not Roman noodles, it's it's a joke that doesn't make sense because it's not even good wordplay, right? It's just a weird joke.
I have no idea.
I want to go through some great quotes. Dom back against the wall. This is one of the great lines near the end of the movie where Dante has him cornered. Helicopter that's shooting missiles kind of shit. "You made one mistake. You never took my car." And then he drives headfirst down a hydroelectric dam and lives. The number of times cars in this movie fall out of a plane or go down a dam and they should crash and die. It's insane. I do like Ames where he's speaking about the Toretto family to Dante and he goes, "It's like a cult with cars." That's such a great and this movie is very self-aware. They make comments every once in a while, sort of meta comments about the plot structure,
Yeah.
which
I mean, they did it more like last movie where they're just sort of like, especially like Roman and like they start, and like with Ramsey, they start talking about all the things that they've done that they shouldn't have been able to do. I think I prefer the last film versus this one because at the least like Ramsey like was forced to drive a car, like a truck, and she's not a good driver. And I enjoyed
the magnet set piece in the last one. But then I think what's comparable in this is the Vatican nuclear bomb set piece, where for some reason they're transporting. Was that part of a trap that Dante set up? Was he had a bomb in the?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like they think they're transporting some sort of microchip to the Vatican. I mean, I know the Vatican has its hands in like sciences and things like that. Some of it, the priests and things, but like, okay. And so the agency, which they've never really explained, is that the CIA? It appears to be some other, like, and is it an international organization? Is it an American organization
that is like not officially part of?
Well, it feels like out of the fucking Venture Brothers, because they literally have a scene where Ames is doing a meeting of like the board of the agency, and it's a bunch of floating screens in the air, like holographic, and they're all like silhouette shadows. Why would they not want their identities known in the meeting of the agency? That why do they not want to know who each other are?
No idea. Like the thing is, like since I have not watched this from the very beginning.
Well, that's the most we've seen of the agency.
I was very confused because they're like, I was like, what the fuck is the agency? So I'm looking online, and of course, there's a fan Wikipedia explaining everything, and I was like, oh, it's a film that I did not watch. Like, and it's just.
Well, I want to go through some characters. John Cena, Jacob. In the last movie, they introduced him, right? And he was the villain.
Yeah.
Or he was one of like 3 villains. Because it was him, Cypher, and then some like no-name shit who dies, right?
Yeah.
And so Jacob's whole thing was like, he barely speaks in the 9th movie. And he's like this formidable foe who just hates Dom. He thinks Dom is like taken whatever birthright he might have had.
Yeah.
In this movie, they have John Cena playing Peacemaker.
Yeah, just like a more low key level Peacemaker.
So he's a more entertaining character to watch, but it's such a wild character shift from just one movie to the next without any attempt to try to explain it, other than they're just like, hey, audiences really like John Cena in that Peacemaker show. Let's just tell him, do the Peacemaker thing in Fast and Furious. Audiences will like that.
Well, like, it's like this whole thing. So he gets Little B.
His whole subplot is protecting Little B.
Yeah, and it's supposed to. So they're like going to his car, and like Little B thinks it's gonna be like this decked out truck. It turns out it's like this old car,
like a station wagon kind of thing.
And I wish it was like because then he's like, oh no, it's my first car. I got it when I was 13. And I almost wish he would have explained to like Little B. He's like, everybody knows we're all about cars. I think it's better off if we have a shitty.
If I just drive an economical family car that's like over a decade old, no one's gonna find us. They're looking for like souped up sports car. Like when you have Roman driving around in a gold plated like sports car in the Vatican.
It's also like this thing of it being like, I almost wish they would have played up at the fact that like, oh, he was basically like a weird secret agent of sorts to explain why it is that he's getting away with certain shit, but they don't. But he does, like, you can't get mad at John Cena because he's still very good bringing something to this character that had nothing. Because when little Brian is sort of like hugging him and being like, I love you, Uncle Jacob, he's just sort of, he doesn't know what to do immediately, and he hugs him back. That's a great progress of someone who like was hating his family and suddenly slowly
he's been like 100% like folded in this family after trying to kill Dom in the last movie. But that's these movies, there's never a villain, it's just it's a family member in waiting who you need to like we're gonna fight you and Dom might have to punch you or like smash you with his car.
He's never gonna kill
but
you.
You're gonna become their friend. Like, and anybody that dies is always killed by the villain in the movie, and they always come back.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I read was that the original post-credit scene for this movie is still in the movie.
Yeah.
It's just before the credits. It's because that was one thing. It was Letty and Cypher. They get taken by the agency, like rogue agency. Okay, and taken to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Which one of my favorite things was whenever Michelle Rodriguez is laying in a chair and there's just this machine that heals her wounds.
It's like lasers.
And it just seals it. It's gone.
Sort of like they're not indicating there's a time jump to kind of explain why it is that like little Brian has been aged up from being like a baby.
So this was to be like
until now.
Near future technology.
Yes. And it's like this no remark on it.
Yeah, but it's like, oh yeah, of course there's a machine that like sutures your wounds and leaves no scar. Yeah, that's like, a normal thing.
Like, and it's just, and like the hacking that Cypher does without even looking at the screen.
Well, she just like, there's a hard drive that you just pull out. Like there's no like opening up the back of a computer and going through wiring. You just grab the handle and it releases from the thing. Oh, but then I want to say what was supposed to be the post-credit scene was Letty and Cypher in Antarctica, and they come over the ridge, and then a nuclear submarine breaks through the ice, which is in the movie.
Yeah.
And then Gal Gadot's character, who died in Fast 6, I want to say Giselle is her character, and I didn't have to look that up. I just remembered it right now. So she pops up out of the top of the nuclear sub, which there's all kinds of things wrong with this scene. Because is she piloting it by herself, or does Cypher have a crew of people piloting the sub? Also, Letty and Cypher recognize Giselle from where they are, which is literal miles away. Like it's flat, right? You can see the sub, but there's no way from where they're standing they could tell who the fuck it was that popped up. But Letty's like, Giselle, what? And in all that Michelle Rodriguez charismatic acting style. It's so believable, her emotions. And like, we'll find out in the next movie. We saw Giselle die in Fast 6, and she's just alive. And there's a fan theory that I'm on board with, and I hope they go this route. The thing that you need to know is the Fast films are made by Universal Pictures. You gotta remember that. When Cypher shows up in this movie, she is driving a new model DeLorean. I don't know, maybe GMC makes it or something, but it's like an electric version of the original DeLorean.
Yeah.
And we all know the DeLorean. It became an iconic car because of the Back to the Future movies, right? So in this movie, we have technology that's crazy that we've never seen before. We have someone who's dead that's alive now, Giselle. And then we watch John Cena die. And it's weird that you would kill John Cena off only 2 movies in the Fast franchise. I don't know, maybe he has stuff he's doing with James Gunn over at Warner with DC. I don't know, right? But like, you figure he could probably work his way in. Here's what I'm hoping, and here's the fan theory. Cypher has figured out how to do time travel. Now, this doesn't take place in the world of Back to the Future, but it is a movie about fast cars. She is going to make a nod because they own the property. They don't have to make it a sequel. She can just go, oh, I fitted my DeLorean up with this time travel tech. And you'll just have like Roman and Tish be like in the movie, right? And what they're going to do is, because this whole plot revolves around Dante's anger over the crew killing his father in Fast 5, right? Mm-hmm. And they use all of this footage from the Fast 5 movie with some new stuff spliced in to show that moment happening with some things added from Dante's perspective. So I want this trilogy, I want it to end, the third one, on them traveling back in time with Cypher's DeLorean, and everyone that's ever died is saved, except one person dies as a result of them changing the timeline, and they can't do anything about it because the DeLorean gets destroyed at the end. Brian. And that's how you kill Paul Walker off in the franchise. And it's like, and then Dom realizes, oh, because I changed all these things in the timeline, Brian died in like a car accident. It'll be like a car accident, or it'll be the way Paul Walker died in real life. It's like, oh no, Brian died. There was a car accident and he died saving somebody. And it'll be like, Brian died a hero. And then there'll be like a big culmination of the Fast franchise right there. I also have a title for the next movie because they can't call it Fast 11. That's not fun. They called it Fast 9, I think, and this is Fast X. The one before Fast 9 was Fate of the Furious with an 8 standing in for the ATE, right? So based on our villain, we just call it Fast and Furious : Dante's Inferno. Because this is the middle part of the trilogy. This is the Empire Strikes Back. This is the low point, right? This is where everybody's going to end up in a horrible place. It's going to feel like they're going to lose. and that's your second movie in this trilogy. I don't know what you call the third one. You find some pun about time and fast cars. I don't know. And so there we go. We have our trilogy. This franchise is insane. And I will say that even though it was 2 hours and 21 minutes, I'm not gonna say never. There were a few moments where I did feel the movie drag, and that's usually when they're talking. Like when Abuelita Toretto is giving Dom a little pep talk, and I'm like, I don't care. This is not why I'm watching this movie. Go away. Anytime people were just talking, I hated it. The rest of it zoomed by, no pun intended. But like it really did. It tore by. There is so much shit in this one movie that it really does feel like a case of they're just making movies that are so maximalist purely because of inflation. They're like, we know you're gonna have to pay a lot of money to come to the movies, so we're promising you two things. It's gonna be very long, and there's gonna be a lot of things happening in it, so you'll feel like you got your money's worth from coming to see it. Are you excited about the next film in the franchise?
No, I mean,
this got me hyped. This got me hyped for the next one. I'm ready.
Not a conservative film. Like,
Oh, they are. They're horribly.
The thing with the cross, because it's like Dom is wearing a cross, and Letty is like, all we need is family and faith.
Well, and there are no, other than Roman, who is the butt of every joke, there are no dark-skinned black people in the world of Fast and Furious. There's also no LGBTQ people in the world of Fast and the Furious.
In representation of black women, you have Ramsey, who is a light-skinned mixed woman in real life. There's no black women. There's no LGBTQ. There's no sex in this film. Whatever representation of sex
it's women at car races are sex objects, but there's that weird scene between Dom and Letty near the beginning.
Yeah, where she climbs up on him like a tree, and
they're
trying to replicate them hooking up in the first film. How she
but it's very bland and not sexy.
And it's just there is no chemistry between. I mean, I don't feel like.
But if you look at Vin Diesel, who's getting aroused by Vin Diesel anymore?
That it's just I feel like there's no. I don't feel like any actor that you put between any of them they will have any chemistry. I feel like Michelle Rodriguez is just sort of this is a paycheck. I'm gonna do whatever.
She's going through the motions.
She's just going through the motions.
Vin Diesel is so earnest in this movie. He really is no, it's really important that we make these movies about family. He's real. You can tell he really cares about these movies, and then the way he talks about it in interviews and stuff. So I'm I give it to him. This is his baby, right? This is his thing. The actor who's doing the most in this movie and is the most entertaining is Jason Momoa.
Yeah,
he's basically playing a Batman villain.
Yeah, I heard again. This is all against my fucking knowledge. Apparently he picked the colors of his car. He was very into getting the outfits. He wanted to be as flamboyant as possible.
He understood this is superheroes and supervillains. That's what the Fast movies are.
And it's this thing of the one thing to show how over the top he is. He's having sort of a spa day with dead corpses.
They were two tech guys he kidnapped.
They were dead.
Yeah, it was. Didn't one of them end up being alive?
No.
There was a later scene where their face was taped up. Remember they started screaming or making a noise? That was a really grotesque, dark scene for this franchise. I was shocked that was in there.
For example, his character starts going off on how we need to remove this toxic masculinity thing, but it's also very weird because he's the villain. So it's this weird thing that's sort of
here's the thing, but Fast and Furious 2 movies from now, he's gonna be best buddies with Dom. That's the way this works. This is how Dom makes all this. Remember Paul Walker, and it's the franchise. Paul Walker was an undercover cop who was tracking a gang of drivers that were stealing DVD players off of semi trucks as they were transporting them. So we have Dom was the villain in the movie, but he and Brian become best fucking friends, like tight friend, like brothers. And that's what this movie's about. It's about how every villain is just a friend that you're gonna make one day.
When she shows up to the house, she
is responsible for murdering the mother of
enemy is you.
Well, she's responsible for murdering the mother of Dom's child, and it's pretty clear she's part of the family now.
Yeah. She also kidnapped, I don't know, because I'm assuming she had kidnapped Letty at some point.
I think she may have been responsible for the death being faked of Letty and bringing her back. Like she was part of that convoluted thing.
Become like
she was brainwashed. Yes, she was brainwashed. I think that might be Fast 6 because she was not in Fast 5. She was dead during that. I want to say, or was that Fast 4, the fourth one?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I have no idea.
No, because the fourth one is where we bring back Dom and he teams up with Brian again. And then the fifth one is in Brazil. So I think it is the sixth one where we bring back Letty from the dead. Because she died. When did she die? She dies in the fourth one.
Questions as to what happens when you are like, oh, I don't want to do the films, and then do they just reach out to be like, hey, we know we killed you off, but what? Well,
one thing I noticed is we have 3 people that were part of the Zack Snyder verse-ish DC, where you have Jason Momoa, who was Aquaman, you have Gal Gadot, who was Wonder Woman, and you have Dwayne Johnson coming off of his failed Black Adam. So it's clear that Universal is happy because
person who is
Captain Marvel,
You have Vin Diesel, who's Groot.
Is that the only superhero people in this movie? Charlize Theron is now Clea in the post-credit scene of the last Doctor Strange movie.
And it's just like, okay, guys, I get it.
Oh, and then Ames, who is the dude that runs the agency, but then is actually working with Dante, played Aquaman on Smallville. So, yeah, if you go into these movies with no expectations, they're wonderful.
I think what I really found interesting, okay, so the last film, they got these 2 younger actors to play the younger versions of Dom and Jacob. And
there's also a younger Mia too, I think.
I don't know.
And was there a younger Letty too? Yeah, I think there was.
I blocked out that part. But then it's sort of instead with the Jason Momoa stuff, it's these flashbacks where they did this incredible CGI where you barely notice that's not Jason Momoa, but they do this weird thing. I think they were trying to make sure the face, so his collar is super high, probably in order to not show the weird, it's just, there is so much. There's so much going on. And
these are a great example.
The 5th film, and I remember you were saying, "Oh my god, they're just the first."
They used a lot of footage, and the 5th one is, I think, the best one in the series. If there is a best Fast movie, it's the 5th one because the bank heist sequence is a really well choreographed sequence where cars are used in interesting ways, and it was a little bit before cars just basically came extensions of their arms, which they just they literally pick things up with their cars now. The other direction this could go, because this is also another Universal IP, Transformers. It feels like, what are you waiting for? Just have a post-credit scene where there's a semi truck parked outside the house in Echo Park, and Dom is like, anybody know who put a semi truck out there? And then you just hear Peter Cullen going Dom Toretto, I have a family of my own and we need your help. And then you just do the and then cut to black. And it's Dom Toretto will return in Fast and Furious : More Than Meets the Eye or something.
One of my favorite moments, which was also just reminding you about how this movie is pure exposition and it's supposed to be
I like to think of it as pure pleasure.
The woman that's she played the rat catcher, she
Daniela Melchior.
She is talking to Dom, and at some point she's like, go save your son, who is my nephew.
Just in case the audience was not clear who I am in relation to what's going on. And then they just kind of Like, it's just a Dom goes like, yeah, you know, it really made me mad when your sister died. And I'm like, what? Who is she?
Yes, and like
Because she just seemed like she was just at a race.
Yes,
She was just at a race in
and,
like
there's a, like,
Brazil.
shrine to her sister.
Yeah.
Oh, sort of like, and she's like, she was always the good one. Da-da-da. And you're sort of like, you were a fucking baby when the last movie came out with that woman on there. And I always love like all the
Everybody, it's half. There's a lot of half siblings in
this
series.
I love that all the photos are basically like you know,
Bad Photoshop.
not even bad Photoshop. They're just stills from the film.
Oh, that is true. They do use a lot of films.
Who the fuck is taking these
What
photos?
a great photographer, and how did they get it? I also want to point out this is also a movie where, like, man, they miss a lot of opportunities to do like moments that could be funny in like a dumb way, but still funny. And this is why I think they need to bring more like comedians and comedy writers into the writers' room, because like, just let this be the stupid shit that it is at this point. When they go to visit Pete Davidson's arms dealer, he has like pot muffins, which is weird because you don't really think of muffins when you think of weed, but okay.
But they're special muffins.
Yeah. And they never say weed muffins, but he goes, oh, my special muffins. And of course, Han, his one character trait he has is he's always eating snacks. And so he starts eating the muffin. As a viewer of films, you go, oh, I can see this. This is a setup for a gag. It's so obvious that's where it's going. And sit back, let's enjoy the gag of Han getting high, maybe while they're driving, and that being, but of course they can't do that because that would be a bad message to the kids. It pays off for like 2 seconds when
vision gets funny.
Two people are fighting, and then it cuts to Han's eyesight, and it's like they're kind of wavy and elongated, and like that kind of rainbow oil sheen, and that's it. Yep. And that's the payoff to the joke. And that's the area where I'm like, let's punch that writing up, Fast movies, because you clearly are dumb as shit. So make that, like, overblow that joke. They're maximalist in some places, but in that, like, be huge then. And you know who would be a great director on these films? Okay. Baz Luhrmann. Elvis.
Oh my God.
It would be like you just gave an ADHD kid like crack cocaine, and it would just be, it would be an explosion of lights and sounds and movement that makes no sense, is incoherent. It would be glorious. It would be a great acid washing movie if you really are shrooms or something.
Don't want it. Don't need it.
So that was Fast X. And I know all of you out there are like me. You're sitting on the edge of your seat wondering, is Jacob really dead? How did Giselle come back? What is The Rock gonna do now that some bitch has brought him into this? Well, Succession Season 4 picks up with the Roy family in the aftermath of the siblings' failed coup. Logan is still in control of Waystar Royco, with plans to sell it off to Lucas Matson's Gojo. Shiv, Roman, and Kendall are trying to go it alone, but not having much success. And eldest sibling Connor is running for president third party. The Roys are more divided than ever, and the stakes are higher than ever. Something unexpected happens that puts the Roy kids in a tight spot where they begin to believe they are capable of more than they actually are. So, Ariana, what did you think of this final season of Succession?
It was a great season. I know, like, it took me a few episodes to really get back into it. Typically with Succession, it feels like within the first few episodes I was hooked, but it was also kind of like you were getting to the point that it was like almost like you assumed as you were watching it that you were going to be lulled into the same old, only for it to twist it about and for you to start to have certain feelings towards these people once more, like either good or bad. And it's also a series of people, much like Barry, where you're not supposed to like them. You're not supposed to cheer for them.
Yeah, there isn't a character in Succession that's like, oh, well, that's the good guy. No, they're all pretty bad with some sympathetic traits.
Yeah, there will be a few times that maybe you can have a sense of like camaraderie, like I don't know how to
camaraderie.
Yeah, towards them, but then they do something that reminds you we are not within the same level. these are just rich kids playing with money and throwing numbers out into the air, and not evaluating how that will like ruin other people's lives. But as long as they're on top and they make the best out of the bad situation, they'll be fine.
Yeah, I thought it was, in my opinion, I think it's the best season of the show. And the first 3 seasons were incredible, but this is all of those character arcs that were being developed, all of the sort of threads and relationships, everything culminates so perfectly in this scene that you really feel there's no reason to keep going. Like, this is the end of the story. I think it's the most Shakespearean the show has ever been.
Yeah.
In terms of the power dynamics and the relationships between people and the roles certain people play, where you have the senior executives who aren't in the Roy family acting as almost like those sort of, said this about Fast X jokingly, but kind of those characters in the background, especially Greg and Tom are very much a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern for the show, where their scenes are funny but still have impacts on the plot. And so the writers on the show do such a good job of integrating character and plot into one thing. So nothing ever feels exposition heavy. You never feel like it's just a sort of navel gazing character study. It's the story moves forward and so do the characters.
Yeah, and this season we also had more inclusion, or at the least back like behind the scenes view of how certain things work when it came to Carl and Frank, who normally are associated with
And Jerry. Yeah.
But this is a time that I feel like those two were highlighted together more than normal, and also just showing, to me, it was like seeing two people that have gone to war together over and over again, where they looked at each other and they're like, do you want to do this again? And they're just like, how dare you even ask?
Because it's sort of like,
because
what else do we know what
yeah,
to do? This is what we've done for almost our entire lives.
And it is a struggle of power where they're watching this family about to tear each other apart. And you could see that they're immediately like emotionally, economically, any other way, like disassociating from them little by little. They're constantly trying to remind them, you are not your father. And they're constantly reminding everyone else, like, yeah, they are not their dad.
Well, and it's just little moments. So like characters like Carolina and Hugo, who are sort of the media comms people, they don't have big arcs, but the little moments they have color in those characters so perfectly and so well. Like when they're in, I think they go to Norway for the meetup with the Gojo people for like to have the first talks about how are we going to transition when this deal goes through, like who's getting fired, who's sticking around. So all these Waystar people are very aware that they need to kiss up to Matsson to hopefully ensure their place if they want to stay.
Well, what I love is like they were doing this thing where it's like, who's the version of me?
And who's his Jerry, like kind of a thing.
And like,
but I want to say that the Hugo, whenever there's like a breakfast spread they have for them that first morning they're there, and when Matsson's team comes in, everybody just starts putting their food onto Hugo's plate, and then a beat later, he's like a downhill skier, a Norwegian downhill skier that works for Gojo. He was like an Olympic medalist. He won bronze, I think, or almost won bronze. And he walks by and looks at Hugo's plate and goes like, leave some for the rest of us. And it's such a thing that, like, even though we don't work for some massive Fortune 500 company, you have had situations where someone makes a comment about something you're doing or something you're holding, and you feel this need that you want to explain to them what's really like, no, don't think that about me.
But it's
such a like human moment.
It's a human moment, but it's also a regard of almost telling them, look at you poor. You don't get to have good food all the time, and here you are pigging it up. And
then near the end of the season, when the big shakeups are occurring, and Carolina makes an offhanded comment to, I think it was Tom, about Hugo.
Yeah.
And it was like, we'd never heard her say anything about Hugo directly before, but that tells you so much about Carolina and her relationship with Hugo. It was such great little moments like that. I want to kind of talk about different characters and sort of the journey we go on with them in this season. Cameron and Willa. or I always want to call him Cameron because that's who he was in Ferris Bueller.
Connor.
And his name Connor is so close to it. That's why I was giving. So Alan Ruck as Connor, and then Justine Lupe as Willa Ferraria. And their whole arc for this season is they have their wedding, and then Connor's failed bid for president that we know is going to be a failed bid from like the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
What did you think of how those characters were handled?
It was very interesting. It was also very heartbreaking towards the end.
Their final scene together is
It's
really
just-
rough.
So there's so much of like them going to Connor about basically having him drop out, of him debating on dropping out, the amount of money that he's spending, the amount of money that's being asked of him.
Because they're worried
in
he's
order
siphoning
to
votes off of Mencken, the
Yes.
Republican nominee.
And it is like, it is basically this whole thing of like, what can he get in exchange versus Willa telling him, we've come so far, you need to complete this whole thing, we need to see it into fruition. And
When he flip-flops so much.
because of the flip-flops, you can see towards the end, it's like, well, you've made your bed, you're gonna lie in it, and I'm gonna do whatever it is that I need to do to survive. And it is so sad because they're about to get married. And Willa just walks out
Of the rehearsal dinner.
of
Yeah.
the rehearsal dinner because a lot of things is happening and Connor is not paying attention to her, and she is unsure if she wants to marry him. He starts to flip out, tells his siblings he wants to hang out with them while he's also obsessively checking his phone to know where Willa is. And at the end, it turns out she's home. She just turned off her phone, kind of thing. And then
Well, he so expects for it to fail, even though you're like, okay, this guy's always gotten whatever he wanted. Why would he be so worried about this? But you realize that's the thing he can't control is another person and how they feel. And so that's frustrating. I mean, if you think about it, this is a dude who's like in his 50s, pushing 60, and he's never been married, has no children.
And he has this whole conversation with his siblings when so Kendall's trying to make him feel better, being like, you can find something better than Willa. And Shiv and Roman say, no, you won't. You'll never find better than Willa. And
the cruelty of that just harsh reality.
And it's also just sort of like the fact that they are constantly in the first few seasons calling Willa an escort, saying that she's just there for the money, and she tells
but I do love it that it's her mother that is like the nail in the coffin to get her to marry Connor, because just from seeing her mother a little bit, it's clear this is a working class background, and she just sees her daughter as never having to worry about any of her needs ever again.
Well, remember, there was a remark about how much food she had on her plate.
Yeah.
They're like saying, oh, she's shoveling it down.
Well, yeah, that's a common thing is in this show, the rich people look down on people who fill their plates because it's that sign of want. And if you're wealthy and
it's
you have
going to be taken away from you.
Yeah. And if you're wealthy, you're not worrying because you'll just throw away stuff.
Yeah. And it's this relationship where Willa is wanting to be this artistic person who's combating on this, like, she has liberal ideologies, but she is marrying a man who's running a conservative alt-right,
whose concession speech sounds like a threat to the nation,
yes.
Which was so funny.
And also going back to him hanging out with his siblings, the sadness of him being like, I don't need love. I've survived without love. I'm not like you guys, always constantly wanting love from daddy. I don't need it.
Well, and like his whole background has always been so tragic. Logan's first wife, sent to a mental hospital, killed herself, I think, is the implication we're supposed to get.
Yeah.
And then Logan remarries, and Connor, I assume, because of the age gap, he's just off at a boarding school, and he's there when family's expected to be there for those like events.
Yeah.
But no one really gives a shit about Connor, even his like younger siblings. And that you're saying, that ending, that final scene with him and Willow, where they kind of like, he's gotten an ambassadorship from Mencken as part of his deal, right? And then she's going to stay in New York because she has a play opening in the spring, and they're just going to do the long distance thing. And they literally just got married like a month ago.
But again, it was because a lot of times any decisions that he has made it without her regard.
And she finally put it down.
Just is like, you bought me this like he buys the apartment / house that like his father had. She's going to remodel it completely. He's telling her, make this into the home that you want.
And was it Croatia he got his ambassadorship in?
Yeah, and like it was a place she didn't want to go to, so she was like, I'm gonna stay in New York.
Yeah. And so that was, I do think he gets the final scene with Connor is a sweet one. It's where they're sitting around, they're watching the video of Logan, and that's like the final time we see Connor.
Yeah.
And it is the family, it's like the last nice moment with the family.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get to, I want to talk about Greg and Tom. There's some things about Tom I want to talk about at the end of this.
Yeah.
Because they were big. But let's talk about Greg's arc. I kept wondering this whole season was, will Greg snap at any point? And I don't really know. There was like a moment where it felt like he was going to, but he came back down from that ledge.
He does, but then he's quick to apologize.
Yeah, because he's still smart enough to know who's above him.
Mm-hmm.
And that the way the game plays and what he has to do. I did think Nicholas Braun was so good. I mean, everybody's good. But I really loved what he did with Greg this season. The interplay between him and his cousins was really good.
And I think I feel as if like those showrunners were sort of having a pulse as to what's going on in the internet. Because there has been controversies about Nicholas Braun, about like a nightclub that he's owned that was allowing underage girls coming in.
Okay.
And I think it felt as if they were being like, we are no longer going to play cousin Greg as this, naive little puppy who's going around no, we are going to show you that Greg has been corrupted and that's it. Greg is no longer a good guy.
Well, he gets so deep in the trenches with Roman and Kendall. And is so just like their lapdog for most of the season.
It's also it's interesting that he goes to Tom asking him, hey, what side are you on? Because I'm playing this. What are you doing? Yeah. And it's also just like towards the finale, that's like a big deal. Like the anger that Tom feels that something is occurring. And because he didn't communicate it with Greg goes in the background to tell.
Well, Greg has it's like the smartest thing Greg ever does is he's standing there and you've got Mattson and one of his guys and they're speaking in like, I guess, Norwegian. Because I think even though Skarsgård is Swedish, I think the character's
they played
Norwegian. Yeah.
Swedish.
And so they're speaking in that language. And Greg just pulls out a translator app on his phone and just turns the microphone on, not because he's trying to spy, but because they've already established he's hung out with these guys before. And so he's trying to keep up with the conversation because he wants to contribute so they see his value.
Not just contribute. It's because they left him out so many times that he's tired of being left out.
And it is the moment that like flips a switch in the finale and is just like the best Greg moment. And then him and Tom in the bathroom at that same like restaurant. It's like the moment it was leading up to with these two. And it's as pathetic as a fight as you could imagine these two would have.
Yes.
There's nothing manly about it. It's like a slap fight, essentially.
Yeah, they don't know how to throw punches.
And so we'll talk a little bit more about Tom when we talk about Shiv, I think. Roman Roy. Now, Kieran Culkin is no longer going to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor in a Drama at the Emmys. He's been booted up to Best Actor in a Drama. So he'll be against Jeremy Strong, I think.
Yeah.
Because for certain reasons, Logan Roy is not in a lot of this season. So what did you think of Roman's arc and Kieran Culkin's performance this season?
It was so intriguing because Roman is showing frustration towards his siblings who keep bouncing between what to do. They are so unsure about themselves. Oh, they're going to purchase this. No, they're going to start this. And it's just like, they've been working on something for months to then pivot and go do something else. And you could see his frustration building because like it's as if like every time his confidence is built up, it's being smashed into smithereens. So he goes back to what he knows best. He goes back to daddy. He goes back to that front of it because
but then when he doesn't have that anymore, and it culminates in the series finale, he has a nervous breakdown.
Yes.
And I love the way they portrayed it as a nervous breakdown is not necessarily a moment, but it's like a chain reaction of moments that lead up to the big one.
Yeah, and like the acting is so well because there's times that you feel really sad and empathetic for him, like being like, no, like Roman is in the right. They really need to focus. And then other times you're like, what a sniveling little fucking asshole.
There was
what a fucking worm.
The second to last episode, I was hoping he died. I was like, there's because he goes out and is confronting a group of protesters, and he's being aggressive, so they're being defensive, and he gets hit and beat up. And I kept thinking, I hope they kill this little shit. Like, he deserves it. But yeah, Kieran Culkin's performance is just.
There's so many times
I could see if he would need to take time away, because he puts everything into this season, and it is such a emotionally intense performance.
There are times when he is acting against Brian Cox, and I saw an interview that he was doing that it was an actress that remarked, and it was that is it, that is exactly it. Claire Danes was interviewing him, and her remark was, watching you against Brian Cox, it felt as if suddenly you were a little boy again.
Mm-hmm.
He
All
even said even acting against him, he's like Brian is amazing to me,
but Logan,
but when I am Roman and he is Logan, I shrink, I become small. And it's so obvious, even when you look at the way, for example, Logan is just sitting down, and typically when you are in meeting things, you always hear about no, you need to be in the higher chair, you need to be standing up, and the other person, even when he is sitting, Roman looks like a child because he's fidgeting, he can't sit still, he's like, yeah, okay, what do you think? What do you think?
What's all the bravado he has with everyone else goes out the window the minute Logan and him are face to face.
And or even just on the phone, just
or
being the authority.
In this season, Logan is not there much, but his presence ripples through the series.
Yeah.
And you can see how Roman still, even with Logan not right in his face, he's still terrified of this man when he has to sit and think about him.
Oh, it's the moment that he had that breakdown that we're not gonna try to fuck it over.
Where he has to give a speech.
Yeah.
About his dad, and it is. That whole episode, Church and State, third to last episode. So it felt like some of the best Shakespeare level writing I've ever seen on television.
Yeah, it's like watching someone have a legitimate breakdown, and then the irrational fear that's bubbling up, that they have to vocalize the question, and they know the question sounds insane. I've had those moments where anxiety is so much where I'll ask you something and your response will be, what are you talking? Why do you need reassurance for this? You know what the reality is. It's but I need to hear you say it. He's bubbling with so much anxiety, insecurity, and loss that he doesn't know what to do with himself. And it's so well done, especially because Roman is such, that arrogance that he carries around, the
self-assuredness, and so eager to be vulgar too.
Yeah,
there's that scene where Shiv tells them that she's pregnant, and he starts making jokes about how was it his, and all this gross incest shit.
And she's like, I'm telling you something very personal. Why the fuck are you making it?
But it makes sense. Roman is terrified of being vulnerable because he knows he'll be hurt. So in moments where normal people would be vulnerable and go oh, Shiv, I'm so happy for you. I can't wait to be, an uncle to your child. He has to violate that moment and corrupt it, because he has, because if I were to be genuine and honest, then they might see weakness in me. I mean,
it's constant between the siblings all times. Mm-hmm. There is a moment towards the in the first few episodes, they manage to outbid their dad on something, and their father has a reaction, and I think it's Shiv or one of I think it's Shiv that asks oh, how was it fucking dad? And he says, oh, I'm just so sad it didn't last longer. And you can tell Roman is disgusted, but it's this is a constant thing between them about making incest jokes with one another.
It's a compulsion for him.
Yes, because it's since they view themselves as royalty, there's a whole remark about new money, right, guys? They view themselves as royalty. Well, royalty, what is it that royalty has done best? beyond just like colonizing and killing.
Interbreed.
It's interbreeding with one another.
So let's talk about Shiv and Tom, because their relationship is so like it is a literal emotional roller coaster. It is. I don't know where they're at, but it always like makes sense. That's where the writing comes in. Is so strong. Is these people say the most vicious, cruel things to each other this season.
Oh yeah.
And you constantly think, this is it, right? This is the end. And it never is. It just keeps going on.
It is a rough watch sometimes, especially like, you know, we've been married for a while, and we have talked about.
Can you say how long?
11 years.
The way you said that, I wasn't sure if you you were like, we've been married for a while. I think that term does describe the amount of time adequately.
Like, do I know my age? No. But it is. I think there's a conscious decision that when you are arguing with someone, there is this thing that you know that like if you said it, you would jab them, but you know very well that if you were to say it, there's a possibility the relationship could be over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or you're going to be hurting this person so bad that maybe trust would be like
it's such a personal deep cut that you don't know if it can heal, kind of a thing.
And with Shiv, it is like she will say these things to Tom and then turn around and be like, so we're good. Like,
well, because think about it, we met Tom's mom in one episode.
Yes.
And that was where he got a lot of insight into who he was and where he came from. He has become like these people, but he wasn't like them before. The place he came from, his background, it was conservative, it was Midwestern, but it wasn't the level of like rancor and guile that the Roys have for each other, like a family that was trying to destroy each other.
Yeah, and I think it's also we can't put into this idea that like, oh, he was maybe a softer version of himself before he got there. I think
he was a working class person, but not a good person.
No, because like I thought what was very revealing was when their fights become really awful because there are moments that they're arguing and they look at each other and Tom will be like, do you want the real argument? Do you want the real thing? And it is also just indicating to you, oh, Tom hasn't been real with her up until now.
Mm-hmm.
He's given her the softer version of him in order to keep her happy or keep her compliant to some degree.
Or to keep him in the family.
Keep him in the family while also indicating to her, it's sort of like, yeah, I do love you, but it's a fucked up kind of love. Because it's not I can't go beyond saying, oh, they're not in love with each other. It's just a fucked up version of love. It's a toxic version of love.
They both care about each other to a degree, but I don't know if they're in love with each other. Like he doesn't want anything bad to happen to Shiv, and she doesn't really want anything bad. Like she doesn't want Tom to die. He doesn't want her to die, but they get so angry at each other. And I think one of the scenes that is the most heartbreaking is when she tells him she's pregnant and it's in the middle of a fight. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't know how to react because he's like, is this a move? Is this like a move in the game? Are you trying to say something that will hurt me?
Yeah.
And it's like a moment that should be their happy tears of joy sucked out of it, right? Just nothing but hate.
It's this weird thing that like Tom has made himself into competition.
He made himself into like a surrogate Roy sibling.
Yeah, like he's in competition with her. Like he has to one up her at some point. He has to be smarter than her. He needs to make the right connections because he doesn't have the same connections she does. And then when Shiv fights with him, she fights as if she's the underdog, but she's not. She fights as if like she's had to crawl her way to the top, but she hasn't.
Well, compared to her sibling, she sees herself as the like bleeding heart liberal. And this season definitely shows you she's not.
I think it's just like she's the ultimate version of like what a white feminist is. Like, let's be honest, if Taylor Swift had not had a good musical career, she'd be fucking shit.
Yeah.
Like, and
she'd be working for daddy's business.
and it's just sort of like this. Also, the heartbreaking thing about Shiv is just sort of like she is like all of the siblings are, in a sense. They're everything that their parents made them to be. Like Shiv had a conversation with her mom where her mom was like, "Yeah, I don't think I really love you guys." Like her own children has openly said that. Now their father has never said it, but like
it's implied.
It's implied.
Or his love is conditional.
His love is conditional. His love is very much in the like. It is this whole thing of building you up to like to build you down. It is this like this whole concept that they at the beginning of the series they are on the verge of maybe going on to a divorce, and when Shiv goes to call a few lawyers, he's already put them on retainer or he's already called them, so that makes a conflict of interest. And then it reveals that it was a move that Logan had made on her mother, and that is a deep cut. And then Logan tells her, "Well, if you'd been around, I would have given you the same advice," kind of thing.
And it also implies that Tom is seen as kind of like an adopted son.
Well, it's like, well, Tom will reap the benefits of what a son will get because you're not around to get it, and that's what I'm just gonna do. And like Shiv is struggling with what is loyalty supposed to look like, and it also kind of puts her up in a fucked up position because she's about to have a child. And I think it was like someone had indicated to her like, I hope you're not pregnant, like almost being like, you would not make a good mother.
Her own mother, remember back in the last season was
they
had that talk at her mother's wedding. Where was it? Her mother's wedding? Yeah. She was marrying that British idiot.
Yeah.
And so yeah, her mom basically is like, "Oh, I don't think motherhood would be like a good fit for you."
And like, and how, like, at the end of the day, when you finish watching it, you're like, I don't think it would either. Like, if you're going to have your children, like this, there's this whole
like,
thing
what is
about
she
legacy.
Yeah,
about what
all she's gonna do is pour into that child what Logan poured into her, which is just pathology and self-hate. And
Madsen at some point he's like, but you're pregnant, and she's just like, so I'll have the baby within like 72 hours, I'll be back at work, I'll be a mother that barely watches her kid, it's not going to be a big deal. Like, she
doesn't seem joyful about becoming a mother at any point.
And it is like this weird thing that she says it, and it's also like, you don't know, because they are the way they are, you don't know what's real and what is a lie. So you really don't know if like she meant it, but because of that, that's going to bite her in the ass afterwards.
Because did she say this to secure her position with Madsen, or is this genuinely her plan when this baby is born?
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get to Kendall. He's the last character we see in the show. And I think to talk about Kendall, we are going to have to get into like spoiler territory more than we already have.
Yeah.
When the season begins, Kendall and the other siblings are going out in their own like media venture. It's sort of like internet TV news thing.
It's a Substack.
Yeah. And he makes a remark that this is what they need to do to keep him sober.
Yes.
Because if they're not doing something related to business, he's going to get idle, which means he's going to get bored, which means he's going to start using again. If we go back to the very first season, very first episode of Succession, he's coming off of like a major drug addiction that he's gotten through rehab on, and he's trying to redeem himself in the eyes of his father.
Yeah.
And so we meet a Kendall at the beginning of this season who's feels as if he's about to tip back into that place again. And then there's a moment a few episodes in, it's when they're in New York for Connor's rehearsal dinner, and they go hang out at the karaoke, and they refuse to meet their dad where he wants. He has to come to them at the karaoke. And he comes down there and he's sort of watching them on display as they're kind of showing out and they're both trying to impress and intimidate him, which is impossible with this man.
Yeah.
And he makes the comment of, "You are all unserious people." Mm-hmm. And the rest of the season is proving Logan right. It's showing you that these, not only are they not serious people, they are ultimately children living as adults. Emotionally, they have not grown since like middle school.
Well,
in the
they're
way they
in-
interact with each other, the way they like talk about themselves or imagine who they are in this world and what they're going to do.
Yeah, and it's also like Kendall is so fucked up because so the election is occurring during this time, and it is this strong bit of like basically saying that like ATN, which is their news outlet,
Which is the one thing Logan's going to keep when the merger happens.
is going to be able to choose who becomes president, like in their conservative party, and how like other places want them to tone it down. It's like really harmful.
Let's go back a little bit. It's in last, I think it was last season, season 3.
Yeah.
They introduced Mencken, played by Justin Kirk, as the guy that Logan was like, this is the guy that needs to run. I back him. So now we jump. There's been this time jump. Connor's campaign is dwindling. He's not even going to rank like 8%. And Mencken's campaign is also struggling against, I forget the name of the Democratic candidate. It was a Hispanic last name.
I think it was like Jimenez.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so that's bad news for ATN in this, both the Gojo buyout, because Kendall wants to torpedo the buyout. He wants the company, and he needs a sympathetic president. And so talk about Kendall on election night, because it's very clear where Shiv and Roman stand on election night, but some of the bad things that have happened to Kendall, like involving his adopted daughter.
So, his daughter got pushed on the street by one of the conservatives that are pro Mencken, it's almost like equivalent to a Proud Boy, right?
Menckenists, as they call them.
Wearing a specific type of shirt. His ex-wife, the mother of his children, calls him, trying to indicate like, you need to do something to have ATN shut this down. You need to show loyalty towards your daughter. And Kendall is like humming and hawing while Roman is in his ear being like, it doesn't fucking matter about your kids.
We need to protect the company.
We need to protect the company. And meanwhile, Shiv is like panicking because she's like, Mencken could ruin the country. Well,
because he's a outright fascist.
Yeah, and like she's like trying to explain to them, it's like, it's one thing if we got a conservative that says he believes it, but he's not. She's like, he believes this. He believes it in his core, and this is like, it is worse when they believe it in their core. And Kendall, in order to keep daddy's company, decides to torpedo the whole thing. And like, it's like horrendous to watch, because it's like,
it was one of the most anxiety-inducing episodes of the season.
Like, he is having these conversations with his ex-wife, and then he's suddenly going like, everything I'm doing is for the kids, but it's not. He hasn't even mentioned them once, but
he never sees them like, except for one time in the season.
The moment that it's sort of like, it is brought back to his face about being like, you need to do something to protect your child. And it is immediately going, well, my fight to keep this company is for them. How is it for them? Like, is you're gonna protect your child somehow? No, it's just because like, it's what was promised to you, so you can promise it to them.
Well, he's like, well, I want to be seen as a good dad,
so I'll use my ambition as an
I'll
excuse
send my security team to tail my ex-wife's car, and that's how I'll be a good dad and not tell her.
And this poor brown child is terrified beyond her mind and is not knowing what to do, and is like now refusing to speak to her own father.
Well, and then the last time we see his ex and that child, they're in a vehicle headed out of town because protests are getting violent in New York, and she just is afraid of something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I love that he does like the typical idiot divorced dad shit where he's like, well, I'm going to call a lawyer. And then he's like, I want full custody. He doesn't care about these kids, really. I mean, I've never really seen Kendall as a loving, doting father. They were the children that they adopted while he was married, and legally he's their father. And you can tell he understands there's some expectation of what he's supposed to do, but he doesn't really seem that interested in them.
Yeah, and like there is this horror. I don't know if it was like during that moment where they're talking about legacy at some point, the siblings. And Roman, to make a dig at Kendall, says, well, Dad didn't think that they were his. They were not his grandchildren. They didn't count.
Well, one was adopted, and then like wasn't the other one look a lot like the tennis pro or something?
Like he's saying, like one is Reva, like makes who like, and that's when Kendall goes in because now they know that their sister is pregnant. So because he's trying to make it about legacy to keep the company. And
well, let's talk about that final scene.
Yeah.
This is a big point. So the three siblings in a conference room having to make a decision, and it's come down to Shiv's vote. If Shiv votes yes, the Roy siblings lose Waystar, it's gone. If she votes no, Kendall becomes the CEO of the company. And she doesn't know what to do, and it's the first time Shiv has made what I would say is it is the right choice that she makes to say no. And I love when Kendall is asking her why, and her reason was, I just don't think you'd be good at it. And he's like, that's insane. That's crazy that you, but she's 100% right. At what point has Kendall Roy shown that he has the ability to manage anything successfully? He hasn't managed his marriage successfully. He hasn't managed his relationship with his kids. His addiction he couldn't manage, and they bring that up because he murdered someone at the end of the first season because he was intoxicated. And I love that when he talks about it, he goes, well, which one? And then both siblings are like, you killed more than one person? And like, well, you're proving we're right. Like, you should not be doing this. And then that when it's Roman makes that dig about his kids, and then he just grabs Roman by the head, and Roman has like open stitches from like getting beat up by the protesters a few episodes ago, and like lifts him up off the ground against this window in full view of the office and the board that's waiting for Shiv to come and vote. It was like, you want to cry, you want to laugh. It's just, you watch that is the moment that the family disintegrates. It is over. These people may see each other in the future, but it's gone. Like any membrane that tied these people together is evaporated in that moment, because that's the moment Shiv makes a beeline for the boardroom. And I love that we are now seeing the events from Kendall's perspective, because by the time he gets to the boardroom, Shiv is gone. She's voted yes on selling Waystar, and it's over. And Kendall is like, well, I think we should suspend the board meeting.
Well,
and like,
what happened? What's the next move? And they're like, it's done.
It's done. Like, and it's that realization that you have no authority. Kendall Roy is not a part of the Waystar board anymore. Waystar really doesn't exist technically. It's Gojo now. And then just the way he silently accepts it and doesn't say a word and just walks down the hallway to the elevator. It's just, but then I love like he gets on the elevator and some random other guy gets on the elevator with him. So it's like he can't even have that moment alone. So good. And then his final scene of the show, where earlier he's hired his dad's bodyguard, which goes back to the first episode of the season, where Logan is sitting at that diner with the bodyguard. And it's really sad, where he's just like, you're my best friend. And it's true, because it's like, this guy is not there to like compete with Logan in any way. His job is to keep Logan from getting hurt, which is something that it doesn't happen too often to Logan. Like, there's not a lot of people attacking Logan. And so it's just, this is the guy who's with him the most that just listens to Logan talk and never judges him. And then so Kendall hires this guy, and that, to me, it was this reading of Kendall can't even kill himself because his dad's bodyguard will be there to stop him.
Yeah, and he hires him out of pity of sorts. Yeah. But it's also kind of funny because when he offers a job, the guy was like, he's like, hey, how would you like to be my bodyguard? He's like, I don't think I would like that.
Well, because he had to go to therapy for like having been Logan's bodyguard. And then that,
because the whole thing is like, you don't have to talk to therapy, you can talk to me.
Yeah. And I'm like, and then we see Kendall in that final scene, like, you are not a healthy person to share things with. And then Shiv and Tom's final scene, the extending of the hand.
They're not even squeezing hands. It's just like a hand on top of each other.
And I don't want to say what happens to Tom. We have spoiled enough, but I would just say Tom Wambsgans might be one of my favorite characters in like American television history. He is such a fascinating character. I feel like you could write a whole book about this character and analyzing him from all sorts of perspectives. You could do that with almost every character on the show. Like Connor is such a fascinating character to me. Carl and Frank are just, I love that we're never going to get to know more about them, and that's great because I'm left with this hunger to want to know more.
Yeah, like I love that Carl and Frank are sort of like, so we're out. They know that they're out.
And they do serve that like Shakespearean role of those characters commenting on the action of the main characters in this sort of bemused, detached way.
Yeah.
But yeah, Succession season 4, such a perfect ending. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about another ending. Was it perfect or not? And that will be the final season of Barry. Well, Barry season 4 picks up with Barry Berkman, played by Bill Hader, in prison for one of his murders. His past continues to haunt him, but he finds a potential new start. Meanwhile, Gene Cousineau is coming under scrutiny for his role in Janice's death. Sally is questioning herself and the men she's chosen to be with. Fuchs is trying to redeem himself, but seems to be failing. And NoHo Hank lets the love of his life slip through his fingers. Ariana, what did you think of the final season of Barry?
I really enjoyed it. So this all started off more like a comedy show, but I did like that for the last season. It's almost like they just turned around, looked at everyone's like, hey, these characters that you thought were cute and quirky, despite the fact of like all the bad things that they've done, let's just face the fact they're not good people.
Well, there was always moments of drama. I think when Barry has that first like method acting breakthrough in season 1, where you like see good acting, like that was this dramatic point. But I think you're right that it's the tone of the show remains quirky and surprising, but the characterization, I think, started to become more grounded last season, especially for Barry. And this season, I was really impressed with, they kind of pare away most of the supporting cast and hone it down to like 5 people.
Yeah.
Barry, Sally, NoHo Hank, Gene, and Fuchs. And there's other people do pop up, but they don't have roles that are that important. And it's more about the arcs of these 5 people, how their lives intersect with each other, and where they all end up based on the consequences of choices they've made over the years. So let's talk about like NoHo Hank. How'd you feel about his arc? Because I felt of all the characters, his story felt the most separate from everyone else's.
I thought it went pretty dark, but I think it was also just being like, yes, we based this character off of what's supposed to be an Apple like
care person,
but we also have to come to the terms that this is a criminal.
Yeah, he's in the Chechen mob
who has like put people to death, and that we should not have to then. It won't be as easy to just be like clean slate. He found the love of his life, and he's just gonna go have a quaint, quiet little life. And it was a show of just being like, he has to come to terms with what he's done, and are they going to be healthy or are they not going to be healthy? And it's going to be like the worst outcome.
When I thought, because there's this time jump about halfway through the season, and it was interesting to see he was still trying to cling to the NoHo Hank that the audience enjoyed, but that was becoming harder and harder for him to maintain.
Yeah.
Because he has so much more responsibility, and there's this weight hanging over him, this thing haunting him from his past that reveals you're not a nice person. You're actually a very bad person. I think that's something even Fuchs realized at the end, which is why Fuchs does what he does, is I don't think Fuchs is there to kill that person. I think he's there to actually save them from NoHo Hank.
Yeah.
Because whenever Fuchs sees NoHo Hank after the time jump, he talks about he wants Barry Berkman. He goes, put me in a room with Barry Berkman. He never says, I want to kill Barry. And we make these assumptions based on who Fuchs has surrounded himself with, his mannerisms, that, oh, he wants Barry so he can kill him out of revenge. But the final thing he does, it's wondering, like, was this his intent the whole time? Or when he saw what had happened in Berkman's life over these 8 years, did that flick a switch in him? And he was like, I have to do the opposite of what I was going to do.
I mean, it's a very interesting thing because Fuchs has this whole like arc that goes through, and then the conversations that he has afterwards. I think Fuchs is sort of like, he comes to terms with himself as a person. He comes to terms with what it is that he wants to project out. And then I think it is also, this season was very much about the stories that we tell ourselves, but it's also the need to have control about your own story.
Mm-hmm.
The need to like want to manipulate what it is that people see about you. And are you willing to accept that person, or are you willing to do a change in order to make yourself better? And it's also sort of like, and how we fall into certain ideas because of the luxury that might bring us, the status that it might bring us. Because with like Gene Cousineau, who does have like a big shift compared to the prior seasons.
Yeah, it was the most impressed I've been with Henry Winkler.
Yes.
Like, if you think of him as Fonzie or the family lawyer on Arrested Development, like, he starts out funny on Barry, but this season we saw like dramatic acting from Henry Winkler. I think a lot of people didn't know he had in him.
Yeah, it was just done where it felt true to the character.
Yeah,
like it didn't feel like it was out of left field. You have a better understanding of the one character that I just like, holy fucking shit, was Sally.
Before we get to Sally, I want to go back to Fuchs. You were talking about roles people play, and I think you're right, because he, a couple seasons ago, started calling himself the Raven. And he wanted people to think, I think at first it was mistaken identity that he was the one doing the killings that Barry was doing. And then he kind of rolled with that because he saw that gave him some type of cred among criminals. And so that's a role that he's playing, is the Raven, but that's not who Fuchs is.
No.
NoHo Hank is playing the role of NoHo Hank, but that's not who he is. He's someone who lost a person he cared about, and it was his fault. But he's trying to pretend that he's still, oh, I'm NoHo Hank, I'm, very lovable.
Yeah.
Sally, we'll talk about her now. Or Gene, let's talk about Gene. Gene is also playing a role because he wants to be seen as the good guy in the story.
Yeah.
When he isn't completely the good guy. He didn't kill Janice, but he knew things that could have brought justice to her killer. And he chose to not go with that. And I've always wondered, like, why? Because he cares about Barry. Like, I feel like he does, but then there's moments where I feel like he doesn't, or he just likes his position as this mentor to this desperate man.
I think he goes with whatever area that gets him praise. And it is this thing of it being like, so Gene is working with Janice's father in order to get Barry, but he can't resist the siren call that is fame.
Because the press is writing about it.
About like the press wants to write about it, and instead of like going with the advice of Janice's father, which he's like, we cannot go to the press. We have to go through trial first, because if we go to the press before that, it's gonna fuck everything over, which is understandable.
Because like a jury and all that,
jury, it's also sort of like the manipulation of what it is, that which side that they're gonna decide on. But who's to know?
Also, then when Gene gets called to the stand, they're gonna use the interview against him.
Yeah, but he can't help to be like, I need to make myself the star. I need to make myself the hero. I need to make myself beloved. And this is also very much the season was about like wanting to be loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also like the backlash of that wanting to be loved, because again, you're trying to control the narrative.
Or you're wanting to be loved by people that maybe you just shouldn't be with that person. Like that person, you
Why
can't get
do
the love that you want
you
from that
want to be
relationship.
loved by unknown people that aren't in your life on a day-to-day basis. You just want the audience and the applause.
Yeah.
And Gene is, you feel sympathy, you feel so sad for him when he figures out that Barry killed
Janice.
Janice. Yeah. And then you feel as if oh well, he's afraid of Barry, but now it's getting to the point that it's like Barry is in jail and he feels no threat, and because he feels no threat, he's like, well, I need to get my way. I need to figure out how to make this a bonus for me.
He doesn't make it about Janice, he makes it about himself. And it shows, like, did he really love her, or did he just love that he was able to charm her? Because that's something he did very well. He was able to charm her very well. And it's sort of, because we see last season, we started to see more of his relationship with his son and his grandson. And that develops in a way that doesn't go where you might expect it in this season.
Yeah.
And you just do realize he is such a self-centered person that everyone exists as a potential audience for him.
They're a co-star.
Yeah, their stories aren't as important as the Gene Cousineau story.
They're an NPC in order to lift me up for my story and my voice to go beyond what it is at this moment.
So let's talk about Sarah Goldberg as Sally. I thought of all the performances this season, like Bill Hader's very good as Barry.
Yeah.
But I do think her performance was the strongest, because Barry's kind of lost his mind by this point, and he's playing it as a man who's lost his mind. Her character goes through like a wave of emotional arcs in this season.
Like I loved watching her because she's struggling with the fact that like she has that viral video where she calls another character like the C word. And how everybody just knows her by that. Her award, like her show that got like critically acclaimed show, got canceled
and replaced with a copycat kind of show.
Like lighthearted version by Natalie, who was like her assistant. And it's like, it's stuff that when you watch it, you're like, yes, in a certain, like Sally deserves it because she was becoming arrogant. But we're also watching like within the season before of her like really taking over something and building something through it, and her not knowing what to do when it's taken away from her. So like she's dealing with the Barry stuff. She goes home. Her father is gentle, but her mother is like, what about everyone
hypercritical
else? Yeah. Hypercritical, no acknowledgement of Sally's pain. Sally ends up going back to Los Angeles, goes to visit Barry.
Goes to visit Gene.
Yeah, but like
before she goes to see Barry,
she goes to Gene, and like that was a heartbreaking like scene because she's like,
it's just, he's such a bastard.
Because it's like she's like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, what are you talking about? She's like, why didn't you tell me about Barry? And he's like,
because he knew that Barry was dating her. He knew Barry's a killer, and that's sort of like, yeah, wouldn't you have warned her?
And she's like, because like in his acting class, she talked about the physical abuse that she went through.
That was the impetus of her whole show that she did.
Like he tells her, like, we're both victims, which is gaslighting her even further to make her believe it's almost like, oh, you deserve this.
What's diminishing her complaint by going, oh, we're on the same level, so I didn't have any more power than you. It's like, well, you did have more knowledge than her. You knew who murdered Janice, and you knew that murderer was living with one of your acting students, and you didn't do anything to protect her, even though like she was safe. I don't think Barry was ever going to hurt Sally. But they didn't know that. There was no way for them to know that. Yeah. No
knowledge of knowing that. And when she goes to Barry and she just like, and she tells him, oh, I felt safe around you. Just because she felt safe was not meaning it was like the best intention of safe.
But that scene, Hader's acting in that scene, because Barry is so desperate to have a connection with someone, because he's having those flashbacks to when he was a kid and how he met Fuchs, and like we realize, oh, Fuchs has known this guy since he was 8-9 years old.
Yeah.
So the fact that Fuchs could do this to someone that he's known since they were a kid, and then like Gene cuts off Barry, So when Sally makes that, I feel safe with you, he's like, what did you say? You said you felt safe with me. And
like,
just the way he's
ends up
like
hanging up the phone in the little visiting area and walks away, but he's clinging to, you said what? You said you felt safe?
The metaphor I thought of in my head is he's desperately planting a seed and wanting it to grow in a matter of seconds. Where it's like, oh, this is someone who'll love me and I can love them. Yes, and we'll get married and we'll be in love. Like he wants all that in that moment when she's just made a sort of an offhand comment about something she felt in her subconscious. And that's why you just see her like repelled from him. It's like, this man is so broken.
But it's also, I think it's that realization for her is that she is broken.
Yeah.
And then she goes through this whole thing where she starts like teaching acting because like Kusino tells her like, you know, you do what you do, like when your back's against the wall, you can't like act, you're gonna teach. She realizes like everybody tells her the method that she's using, which is the Kusino
cruel.
is cruel and it's abusive. But the one actor that stays did book something big, and how she almost tries to steal that role because she wants to show how good she is.
Well, think about it. That's something Kusino would do.
Yeah, she tries to steal the role.
And she does. I think she realizes, I don't want to be like Gene because I can see the kind of person he's become.
But it's also like she's talking to someone who's like telling her like, I can get you into directing, I can get you into all this stuff, like I can get you into writing, you can't be acting right now. But he's like, I can give you a career. And she's sitting there blank face getting the information that Barry has gone out, doesn't react because already she's decided, I need to pay for my sins.
Yeah.
And it is heartbreaking.
Because then when we have the time jump and we're 8 years later and Barry and Sally are living somewhere in the Midwest. It appears like middle of nowhere, maybe Montana or something. I think they may have said
it's like similar to all the visions that he was having about Fuchs.
Maybe like Oklahoma or something.
It's like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And then
settled them in.
The life that they're having is so suffocatingly bleak. Yet Hader, because Bill Hader wrote every episode of the season.
Yeah.
Which I think is good because every episode propels the story forward. There's never anything that feels like filler.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way he frames their life together is just, it's a nightmare. It's like a nightmare she can't wake up from.
Well,
and it's not that he's abusive. It's just, this is a life that doesn't go anywhere.
It's a life that basically all his love and effort has been focused on their son. But it's also like it's not as if he's making this child into like the smartest, sweetest kid in the world. He's also fear-mongering him
with Christianity.
And like these videos of kids getting hurt with baseball stuff because his son is playing baseball with other kids. He's wanting to isolate his child from other children from contaminating him.
Well, think about it. If we go back to those memories he had of Fuchs, he's worried there's a Fuchs out there that's going to turn his son into what he became. And instead of just raising his child to have, good values and trust in his father and all this, he's just, well, I have to program him. So he's becoming what Fuchs was to him because Fuchs programmed Barry. And so now he's programming John. And that, it was so, and then you see Sally, who has disconnected from all of this through alcohol.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think is interesting about where she ends up is Barry is just a repeat of the guy that her trauma is based on, that she fuels her acting with. Yeah. It's just another abusive guy who may have some nice qualities, but ultimately doesn't care about her.
Well, it's a nice guy that has basically taken her life and made it completely his.
Yeah. And I think what she does with John at the end is a realization of, I can't do anything about an adult grown man. And we even see that in when the epilogue of the show, where she comes across a work colleague and is just like, no, thanks, when he asks if she wants to go out. And she's devoting her life to, I'm going to raise this child to be a good person.
Like, to the best of my abilities,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to control him.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do what Barry did and try to brainwash him. I'm just going to like be there for him and hope that he doesn't end up like all these horrible toxic men that like I keep encountering, the Gene Cousineaus, the Barrys.
Yeah,
everyone.
but it's also like the breakdown that she has in front of John while they're in the middle of like these like very dramatic moments that they are alone, where she tells her son, I just want you to know that you were a good kid and I never told you that. Like and like her sobbing felt like so earnest and realistic, where she's holding her child, apologizing for the failures of her motherhood. Like, because at the beginning we see that she just you think she has no emotional attachment to this child.
She just turned it off.
And she turned it off because it's sort of like because Barry took over.
We was so dominant, like you can infer that he was so domineering about how John was going to be raised. She was so tired from this life of constantly being worried that they're going to get caught that she's just like, fine.
And like the way that she confesses to her son, like, yeah, your father is a murderer, but I killed someone too, so I had to pay for it. And it is just like her having to live with that versus what we see in Barry, who Barry does not show remorse.
He never feels guilt, really.
And in fact, within his own religion is making excuses for himself, which is such a reactionary like response, right? Yep. He looks for things that are telling him that he's in the right. So like he's listening to a podcast and the podcast is saying, hey, killing is wrong. He stops listening to that podcast and he finds the podcast that tells him, hey, I killed a bunch of people, but I spoke to God. He forgave me, so I'm good.
I do love that bit that he put in there because it's such an American mindset of the on-demand, tailored to your tastes sort of culture, where I want to do Christianity, but I want to do it in a way where I never feel bad about any of the things and impulses that I want. And it's like funny and like heartbreaking at the same time, because you realize he is learning nothing. He's always going to make an excuse. Barry's always going to find a reason why he's justified in doing what he's doing. And to me, in a lot of ways, Barry almost felt like just as much a supporting character as everyone else this season, which was very interesting. Like, while his name is in the show, he didn't really, his actions in the past dominated the story, but as a character, Barry felt like he was just lost, right? And it's in the final scene that we have with Barry. What did you think of that moment?
I thought it was very interesting. I think the one thing that I do want to point out is they never have Barry do that cool, like, coming in, guns blazing thing that we've seen before. And it was also like just the showing of his luck has run out. Like, this is a man who has survived out of sheer luck and ability to like take advantage of things. Someone that
and lie
through it and seem earnest, and it's just sort of like it was quick and it was what he deserved.
I think it was kind of inevitable for a person like Barry. You're like, they're just not gonna get a happy ending. I can't imagine if this character gets a happy ending, it was so unearned. It's something that the character, like you said, he doesn't deserve that ending. We can still feel sad and like you can still have empathy for Barry, but at the same time, you're like, what, do you think you can live a life like this and then there's just not going to be any consequences for it? And talking about the gun violence, that was one thing I thought about on reflection about the show. Is I love the way the show portrayed gun violence. It was never glamorized, in my opinion. There was never like music that made the gun violence seem cool. Gun violence always felt quiet. It felt quick. And then the camera would kind of linger. There's a scene in this where two opposing sides open fire on each other in the finale. And then the camera kind of goes to black. And then when it comes back, it's just a bunch of people laying on the ground. Some are dead. Some are groaning in pain. People don't know where other people are, and they're desperately crying out for like, to know, are you alive? And it's just, I feel like it does a very good job of showing you that in real life, in a situation in which guns are being used, bad things are going to happen, and it's not going to be necessarily a quick death. You may bleed out alone for hours in agony. And I think that was something that you could tell that Bill Hader very consciously thought about when they were making the show, is this isn't going to be a show that glamorizes the character of Barry. I love that we got a Fred Armisen cameo. I think he maybe has one line of dialogue.
Yeah,
and it's such a weird character, but a perfect Fred Armisen character. And like with Succession, it felt, there's no more of this story to tell. There's no reason to follow the characters. I won't talk in depth about the epilogue because I want to leave that for people to kind of discover, because it reframes a lot of things in an interesting way, and it's a perfect way to look back at your entire series and talk about it with the audience to a degree and get them to start to think about certain things. But yeah, Barry season 4, another great ending. And I think it's interesting, we had Barry and Succession end on the same day, and also end not on HBO Max, but on Max.
Yep.
And both shows, I think, make subtle digs at the corporate media structure that they're a part of.
Yeah.
Knowing that this is it. This is the end. And we really don't like the direction all of this is going. And we're happy to be ending now. I also think, I can't imagine, because the writer's strike is going on as we record this, and no real sign of ending. It doesn't seem like the studios have any interest in ending anything anytime soon. But I can't imagine, there's no way any AI could write scripts as well as Barry and Succession scripts are written.
Yeah, and Barry this season felt like there was a lot of homage to like European, Italian films,
like 70s film.
Yeah, and it's the quietness that would follow certain violence as the blood would trickle out, and it's just like the person is sort of urging on the edge of death but not wanting to really fully give themselves in, to have these flashbacks where there is the middle of nothing and there's a child playing like pretend with like toys, and you never see anything from up close, it's from a distance, so it's like a ton of like empty space.
Well, it's something where like a human had to think this out and understand emotionally what framing a scene like that means in the context of the whole thing. And I mean, I have no doubt that the media companies are going to churn out AI written, potentially human revised scripts, and they're going to suck. But honestly, when you look at a lot of the human written movies that we have now, things like the Marvel movies and Fast X and all that, they might as well be written by AI. I mean, it's a waste of human talent anyway. And I mean, I'm sure there'll be people that enjoy those things in the same way that, an orphan raised on gruel enjoys the gruel. They don't know what good food tastes like, right? So there'll be people who they're raised on shit like that and they think it's good. My only hope is that at some point in their life, they discover real art, real cinema, and realize what they've been watching is passable but crap ultimately, and that true art is something that is made by human beings. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Pop Cult Podcast. Make sure to check our show notes for any relevant links, including links to our website, popcult.blog. If you check out our website right now, we're in the midst of doing a queer cinema series for Pride Month. Upcoming films include But I'm a Cheerleader, Claire Denis' Beau Travail, Wong Kar-wai's Happy Together, and more. As far as TV shows that we're reviewing over there, we've got Season 3 of Deadwood coming up soon. And we'll also be taking a look at Damon Lindelof's Peacock series, Mrs. Davis. Comic books, I'm working my way through Grant Morrison's work this month, focusing primarily on his Batman run, as well as his All-Star Superman miniseries. Our next episode of the podcast is going to be celebrating some film anniversaries. We'll be looking at Last Action Hero on its 30th anniversary, as well as the comedy Trading Places, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary. If you enjoy what we do here on the podcast, what we do over on popcult.blog, we would encourage you to think about supporting us on Patreon. We have many rewards and goals. And we want to thank our patrons. We've got Morphine, who donates at our sneak preview level, and Becca and Matt, who donate at the writer's room level. You donate at the writer's room level or higher, you get to pick a movie every month. I'll watch it, review it. You can even add your own thoughts if that's something you want to do. Well, until next time, keep watching.